Today we're breaking down a story called No Longer Present. It centers on pain. The story follows three guys, Adrian, Joseph, and David. These three guys are totally depressed. Adrian is an artist, but he also enjoys all sorts of pain. He even used to have a dominatrix girlfriend, but he ended it with her after he found out that she had stalked him years before they met. Adrian sometimes cuts his wrist, but he only crosses the street. He doesn't go down the road, showing that he's not really into committing suicide. As for Joseph, he has just allowed himself to get buried by his work. Joseph also buries his own feelings of unhappiness. And David is just done with life. Completely over existence. He even took a couple bullets for some random people, but David ended up living through that incident. One day Adrian's landlord has to go check on Adrian because he's not answering the door for the mailman. The landlord comes into Adrian's condo and sees Adrian in the bathtub passed out after cutting his wrist while drunk. The landlord is upset with Adrian, and Adrian explains that he's not suicidal but just likes pain. The landlord tells him that he needs to get some therapy or he'll evict him. Meanwhile, Joseph takes part in a study and meets a guy named Kevin. Kevin takes Joseph on a guided meditation journey. He brings up the fact that everybody has a place in the planet. He talks about people in Africa making bread to survive, and brings up people fighting in wars around the world. And for a moment Kevin even guides Joseph as he coasts through space. Joseph tells Kevin about an ex-girlfriend named Katie he had before he became overwhelmed by work. She left him and got pregnant by a man who didn't want anything to do with her or the baby. She then went back to Joseph for 3 years before the father of the baby suddenly returned, and wanted to try to work things out. Katie went with the father of the child, and left Joseph all alone. Kevin says that he'll give Joseph a call about the next part of the study soon. Later on, Adrian sees a therapist, and they discuss masochism. Adrian argues that everyone is in pain, they just handle it differently. Adrian just likes to feel it physically while accepting it emotionally. Fred, the therapist, tries to convince Adrian that it is morally wrong to inflict harm on yourself, but they end up not agreeing. Later, Adrian and David end up taking part in the same study with Kevin that Joseph had done earlier. Adrian, Joseph, David, and a man named Jake meet with Kevin, and Kevin shows them a device that kills you, but it feels terrific when it does. It's a device that will let you die without worrying about it being painful. Jake immediately walks into the device. After a moment, David does as well. For a moment, Joseph contemplates, but Adrian convinces him not to go in the device. When they try to leave, Kevin and his bodyguards attack them, and tie them up. Joseph ends up going in the device after they threaten his family. As for Adrian, he enjoys pain, and has no family, so they cannot convince him to go in the device. Adrian ends up breaking out of his restraints, fights a few more bodyguards and escapes, but not before one of them tell him they will hunt him down. Adrian gets home and starts packing. A bodyguard breaks into his house, but Adrian decides to get drunk and commit suicide in his bathtub. He struggles to do it at first, but he imagines his dominatrix ex-girlfriend helping him go down the road. The bodyguard discovers Adrian dead and leaves. Later, Adrian's landlord finds Adrian in the bathtub and notices Adrian had recently installed a security camera to monitor his artwork. The story mainly has to do with the idea of transcendence when ready, and the morality of suicide. It is clear that death, and the afterlife is on the mind of the three main characters, and in the end all three feel justified in wanting to leave this life. Even David, who seems to feel like he's done living, but also feels like he has a freebie because he saved those people. Joseph ends up sacrificing himself once his family is endangered, which is a very honorable thing, and Adrian Adrian tried his best to save Joseph and himself, but in the end he goes out like a badass, because he knew they would find him and kill him, and wasn't gonna let him have the satisfaction of killing him, or forcing him to go in the device. Earlier in the story, Adrian paints a picture of a gloomy road where the trees are dead in the beginning, but as the road goes on there are green hills and a sunny sky. Though Adrian harms his body, he seems to believe in a heaven, and at the end of his life he seems confident enough to leave this life knowing that he did his best to belong in a nice afterlife, should it exist.